Well, a few months ago on this show, on the All Things Mizzou podcast, Missouri Tigers on SI, I had said something along the lines of how long-term projects are a rarity in college football nowadays. The importance of recruiting in-house, making sure you guys are staying within your team, not transferring. Eli Drinkwitz said 2 weeks ago that over the second bye week of the season, they spent that talking to their players to see where they were at and maintaining those guys, keeping those guys in house. And now Williams Nwaneri announcing today through multiple reports that he will enter the transfer portal. Has not officially happened yet, and also doesn't mean he's going to leave the school. He could come back after entering the portal, but more than likely, you would think testing the waters to see where he could land. And Nwaneri only got 38 snaps this season, so a lot of factors in this that a lot of people I think are going to just immediately attribute to him being, trying to get as much money as possible, which, is undoubtedly the case for a lot of players entering the transfer portal. But there's a lot of nuance to this that we're going to hopefully discuss. I'm Joey Van Zummeren, joined by Michael Stamps, two reporters here at Missouri Tigers on SI, with Nwaneri, top prospect for Missouri, both in the state and then for the school in the class of 2024. Top 10 prospects, had a lot of hype coming in, and like I said, only appearing in 4 games this season. So a lot of stuff to talk about with this. But Michael, this news broke around 9 a.m. this morning on our third day of Christmas break. So just what's your general reaction to this news?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I was telling you before, before we started. It's a, double-edged sword a little bit. On one hand, that is your third highest commit in program history. Probably one of the most highly renowned high school prospects out of the state of Missouri, and he was one of the most highly renowned prospects in the country last year. So, just the face value and name value for losing a guy like Williams Nwaneri is going to be unfortunate. It's an interesting optics game when you're trying to keep the best players in state, and you can't. Obviously, you get him out of high school, but a year later he leaves. So, there's that, and it's unfortunate. And like it is important, to mention, Joey, that like you said, that it's possible that he returns. And there could be a wild amount of factors that play into this that we just don't know. Not our job to speculate on those. It also doesn't seem like he's officially in the transfer portal yet, right? It's all reports as of now, and I'm not going to say that will be confirmed or won't be confirmed, but kind of looks like it's trending that it will. But who's to stop the Missouri coaching staff from, trying to get him to come back, and with whether that's NIL or just more recruiting pitches and stuff like that. The other side to this is it's a very, very, very stacked position. On this team. Obviously, you bring in Javen Hilson and Dayton Hopkins, 2 4-star guys. Javen Hilson's no slouch. That's a top 50 recruit. And I was actually just looking it up. Javen Hilson is the 7th best player, according to 24/7 Sports, 7th best commit in program history. So that doesn't suck. You brought in Jalen Brown alongside Williams Nwaneri last year, who was another 4-star, very, similar type of player in the way where it's, freak athlete, bit of a raw, project. So you have that guy as well. And then you have plenty of guys right now. Obviously, you bring back Zion Young and a whole bunch of other guys, Ja'Kai Lang. The list goes on and on and on and on of guys who are going to be able to play at the position. Eddie Kelly. So, it's a loss. Yes, it's unfortunate, and I'm not going to say it's not going to make an impact on this team, but it's not like the departure of Williams Nwaneri has Missouri hurting at the edge position. That's just not true. And there's plenty of very, very talented players who are going to be able to step in for, I don't know if they knew what role Nwaneri was going to play next year, but, there's going to be guys who could step in, and play that role. Also, I would foresee the defensive end or edge rusher position continuing to get more stacked in the transfer portal. There's already a couple guys who I would imagine are pretty intriguing. I believe Missouri just offered Deshaun Warner last night, who is a freshman at KU this year. So talented player there. There's a whole bunch of guys that I imagine they're going to look to the transfer portal now. The only thing it really changes roster wise is they're probably going to look at edge rusher in the transfer portal. So not to say that the loss doesn't hurt, because it does, and it hurts for the optics of being able to keep the in-state guys at home. but also he's, he was rated that high for a reason. He's a freak athlete and has all the tools to be a heck of a football player. And it's a shame that more than likely it's not going to happen at Missouri. Like I said, anything's possible, but definitely two sides of the story.
Right, and I think the thing is, Missouri always viewed Williams as a long-term project, at least reading through the lines. When he reported for fall practice, Drinkwitz said, "We just need him to lace his shoes up, and everything else he'll take care of himself." And it said that they don't need him to come in and play right away. And then you compare that to, I mean, just 6 days ago too, which I find really interesting about this whole thing, is that multiple times on his signing day press conference, Drinkwitz mentioned Williams Nwaneri being in the future plans for this program, mentioning how Jack Lane, the top rated prospect in the class of 2025 from Missouri, was looking forward to getting to compete against Williams. He mentioned the depth they have at the position, and he mentioned the fact. I mean, he didn't mention Williams here, but an interesting kind of caveat to it, if you will, the fact that Javion Hilson saw the opportunity in the SEC to play at specifically defensive end right away. And so just the contrast of how they talk about Williams. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter. I knew as soon as this news broke that it was going to be an interesting day on Mizzou Twitter, talking about the fact that, maybe he wasn't what the coaching staff expected, which could be true. But I also think out of high school, it was clear that he had all the talent in the world. But it was also clear, especially, I mean, seeing him in person at fall practices, and I'm not, a professional evaluator, but seeing him, it looked like he had room to grow into his body and needed to develop into that. Obviously, you're going to need to develop into the SEC at any position. But I would imagine it would be hard for him to see what a lot of people have brought up. Dylan Stewart go in and play out South Carolina, immediately make impact. 6.5 sacks on the year, was rated closely behind Williams at the edge position in that same class. And, it was interesting all season to see, a lot of people seeing a lot of opportunities for Williams. But then you and I think we're kind of on the same page at a lot of points. Like, he's not going to play a lot. I mean, we talked about even at the start of the season when we were talking about who's going to make an impact their true freshman season, and we did bring up Greco, I believe Rodriguez too, who were ultimately the two most important freshmen or most active freshmen. But with Williams, we were kind of on the same page of just the way the coaching staff was talking about him and what we knew about him as a prospect, that he was going to take some time. And then even when Joe Moore or when Darius Smith went down with injury before the start of the season, we were still on the same page. I don't think this increases Williams' playing time too much. Now, when Joe Moore went down with season-ending injury right before the UMass game, there was reports by Mizzou Radio who broke the news that Joe Moore would be missing the game, that Williams would see an increased role in the game. And he saw 16 snaps in the game, but it was mostly from in garbage time once Mizzou had taken quite a big lead on UMass. And then after that, it wasn't like he was a present part of the lineup. So, again, developing these long-term projects is a pretty risky thing. You have to make sure you have long-term commitments. And specifically for Missouri, who has really benefited clearly from their unique in-state NIL laws where they can, any in-state prospect who commits to them, they're able to start getting NIL money as soon as they can. So in their senior year of high school can start getting that money. But can you be sure that they're committed to you long-term? Because that's unique to them in high school. That's a competitive advantage that Mizzou has when these prospects are still in high school and obviously when they're making this decision. However, once they get to the college level, it's an even playing field. Mizzou no longer has that advantage, and these guys contest waters. And again, who knows Williams' a reason for it. But interesting conversation to be had there about just the ways that Mizzou will have to continue to learn how to use these NIL laws to advantage. And for every school, really, that is navigating different in-state NIL laws. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, Michael, I like what you mentioned. They do have talent at defensive end. Jaylen Brown, They'll have Eddie Kelly and Zion Young returning, Darius Smith as well. So they got a solid group. You would think at the very least would add another depth piece, because we kind of agreed in that last episode of the All Things Mizzou podcast that Williams would kind of be a guy that they expected to take a step up in this one. You look at where he might go. I mean, not that it really matters to Mizzou, but Oklahoma and Georgia were in his top 3. Nebraska was also involved in his recruitment. So interesting things to watch there. Michael, any thoughts on just kind of reading between the lines of his playing time this season?
I mean, a couple things. One, the hard the hard truth is that it is much easier, much more challenging to come in to an SEC or Power 5 football program as a true freshman and play right away. You look at guys like Dylan Stewart and Colin Simmons, who were kind of the two, I guess, marquee freshmen, true freshman edge rushers in the entire country, and they're not only freak athletes and hyper athletic, but they're mature physically. And you can tell they just have a different perspective and outlook on the game that allows them to get on the field and get to the quarterback, right? And that's okay. That's amazing. Not everyone's ready for that right away, right? And that's why you trust your developers. And I guess, like we said, Williams Nwaneri just wasn't ready yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the general idea behind college football is you let guys develop for a year or two until they're ready to play. So
at least what it used to be.
Yes. Right. But now, I mean, like you said, obviously now he has the, more glaring, intriguing option to transfer. Other thing that I always like to think about is, with these recruiting rankings, right? And I've definitely talked about this here before, but with these recruiting rankings and stuff now, they are so, with these high school kids, they're so potential based. And if you look, I mean, I don't know how many times I've referred to somebody as a freak athlete, or they're insanely athletic and they're super fast for the position or super strong for the position. Majority of what makes these guys ranked so high is how athletic they are, and their frame and their body, and projecting the idea that if they fill into their body and maintain that athleticism and stay healthy, and just get the feel for the game in a year or two, then they're going to live up to that number 1, number 2, 5-star rating or 4-star rating, right? So my point being is, Williams Nwaneri, a guy like Williams Nwaneri, was never going to be ready to go from day one. I think that was pretty easy to see. And it's nothing against the kid, right? I mean, that's just how it is. And he had a great high school career and all that stuff, but he just wasn't going to be ready. And I mean, most of that 5-star rating, I'd like to think, was the idea of what he could be. The projecting, if he maintains athleticism and fills out his body, just that alone is going to be enough to make him one heck of a football player. So something to think about. I would like to think, as far as the outlook for where he'll go next, I don't want to rule out the option of him not coming back. I feel like that's something that needs to stay in the minds of people. Again, there could be a million different reasons, where, why he's transferring. I can't even think of a school that he would go to right now, because if you look at if it's a playing time issue, then, maybe Georgia isn't the best place to go. I don't know what Oklahoma looks like at the position. Maybe they have more openings, but I would imagine that's still a pretty competitive, roster spot there. So I don't know, what the next spot could be. Nebraska maybe is an option. I know they just lost 2 of their best pass rushers. I know one of his, this is, random thought, one of his teammates, former teammates, Kamori Moore, who was a target of Missouri's at Iowa State. So a small, maybe bumping down a level and going to a school like that would, be beneficial. Or maybe Missouri brings him back, right? And that's, again, like I said, something that you probably have to consider. Obviously there's the NIL aspects of it, and we're not here to speculate, but could be playing time, could be NIL. Maybe he just wants to change the scenery. And I mean, yeah, it's a shame. Definitely not the news I would anticipate many expecting at 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, but it is what it is, and that's the nature of college football now. And if they know they're not getting him back or don't have a chance to get him back, it's time to go fill that role.
I did want to hit on a little bit of what you were talking about at the top of just the optics of this. And Obviously it would be dumb to act like they're not losing a talent here, but they're going to be set at defensive end. But I think the bigger loss from it is just, I mean, this happens to every school, right? But the fact that Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz have prided themselves so much on being able to recruit within Missouri, keep in the best in-state guys, and to lose Williams after one season is rough. Especially, we were talking. Well, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but a thought in my mind has been just who is the real star on this Mizzou football team. And Williams, I mean, obviously he wasn't the season because of the lack of playing time, and if that continued into his sophomore year, would also be the case. But just like Luther Burden was a highly coveted national recruit, and had that potential to be a star. So it's difficult for Missouri because they have really prided themselves on embracing this like blue collar aspect of the state. All of this recruiting it's a lot of marketing, and so getting this top in-state guy is part of that. And being a place that develops talent is a big part of that. And they've been a rare spot over the past 2 seasons because they've been able to really pride themselves on the fact that they aren't just going out there and every off season rebuilding their whole roster. They have to this year because of a lot of the guys that are losing eligibility. But you look at the biggest stars for this team, Luther Burden, they keep in house for 3 years. Brady Cook, a guy who starts out as a 3-star prospect out of Chaminade, develop him, goes through the lows and all the way up to the highs. Cody Schrader, even though he was acquired through the transfer portal, he comes in as a preferred walk-on, again, in-state guy. And then, you look at all the draft picks from last season: Darius Robinson, Ennis Rakestraw, Chris Abrams-Drain, all Tyron Hopper even. Oh, well, Tyron was through Florida. But all guys, those three, Darius, Ennis, and KD, guys that they developed, start out as lower prospects. Isaiah McGuire you could throw into that mix, even though he's kind of hybrid mix between his career starting before NIL was allowed, I believe. But guys, they recruit as lower prospects because of where they were at 5 years ago and develop into these talents. And now that's, just becoming more and more difficult. And as they continue to elevate as a program, you're going to see they kind of have to branch away from that just because of the access they have to these guys now to be a top player in the transfer portal. I mean, Miller Moss is on his visit today. So lots of interesting things that I think this departure would say about Mizzou as a program and where they are changing. Some good, some bad, but I don't think it's the world isn't falling for Missouri certainly.
I just want to add one more thing really quick, and I found this to be interesting. I just popped over to Twitter right as you were talking, and something interesting that came to my mind. I just saw a tweet, an On3 report that Dylan Stewart, South Carolina's pass rusher, just received a new deal to stay with his team. I believe we saw that with Jalen Daniels, Kansas's quarterback. He received a new presumed NIL deal. And I think there was one with Cincinnati's quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, as well, which I guess prevents them from leaving to get more money in the transfer portal. So by no means am I saying this is connected to Williams Nwaneri at all. Just saying that's kind of an interesting, thought to keep in mind that Missouri can always offer him more than he was already getting. If they really want him, if they do want him to return that bad. But just an interesting, comment and idea to think about for where we are with NIL and college football and college sports in general. Because, when you hear something like that, the immediate thought is, wow, he just re-signed a contract or he's re-signing a free agency deal or something like that, which, is kind of what this has been like the last year or two. But that specific terminology really is the most, maybe the closest we've been to, professionalism and free agency and that sort of thing. So not directly tied to Nwaneri, just something to think about as well, that maybe, they're hashing out a new deal or something like that. That's always, that's just, just a thought to, throw out there.
Right. And I mean, without the structure to this and the fact that, again, we don't have these numbers available to us. It's really difficult to really assess a lot of these situations. And um, I mostly side with the players on a lot of these cases, and I think it's difficult. You know, may it be more beneficial for Williams? Consider you know imagining that the main reason for this is money. Maybe it might be more beneficial for him to trust the process of one school, stay with one school, and just develop there. But nothing is guaranteed. And the sport, as football in general, you can't assume that you're going to make the NFL, and you can't blame these players for how little structure there is in place right now. You can't blame these players for trying to get the most out of their college career as they can. So there's a lot to figure out with this. The Williams Nwaneri transfer portal departure is obviously not in a vacuum at all. So we'll see how this plays out over the next few days. Would expect the additions to start coming in for sure. I mean, transfer portal officially opened on Monday. Mizzou has Miller Moss, like I said, on a visit early this week. They also have the Purdue quarterback Ryan Brown allegedly setting up a visit with them. So again, expect to see some of these actual additions come in the next few days. You mentioned the edge rusher from Kansas. So a lot of frenzy happening over on the transfer portal. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Michael?
I mean, just to the Missouri fans who are going to be disappointed about the departure of Williams Nwaneri, which is completely justified. You want to keep those in-state guys at home, so it's going to sting, I'd imagine, and justifiably so, assuming he doesn't return. But in the grand scheme of things, Eli Drinkwitz, as far as player retention goes, has done a pretty darn good job. What he lost, off the top of my head, as far as the big names go, would have been DJ Wesolak and Jabari Johnson last year. I can't
Dominic
think of any.
Lovett.
Dominic Lovett was a big one too, but big losses, yes. But manages to fill those roles still. You lose Lovett, you bring in Theo Weiss, that sort of thing. But even last year, I mean, didn't really lose any, huge names. A lot of younger pieces, which might have been disappointing, but still guys that I'm not saying they're replaceable, but he managed to bring in guys to fill those roles. So there is definitely the feeling of being upset and frustrated and disappointed in Williams Nwaneri leaving is justified, but there needs to be a certain faith in Eli Drinkwitz's ability to bring guys in, because like you're seeing and like you mentioned, names are already swirling for who Missouri's can host on visits. Miller Moss would be quite the big name. Just saw a report that they're going to plan to host Coastal Carolina quarterback Matthew McDoom, which is one heck of a football name, by the way. But he was a Sun Belt All-Conference cornerback. So the names are flying around. There's other guys that they're hosting on the defensive side of the ball. So I think there's still plenty of reason for optimism, and the offseason is just getting started. And the departures are not the fun part by any means at all. Obviously, Mekhi Miller's gone. Brayshawn Littlejohn entered the transfer portal as well earlier, a couple days ago. So it sucks. It's kind of the not fun part of the offseason, but the fun part really hasn't even begun yet, because once they start bringing guys in, to fill these voids that they're losing, whether it's from graduation, NFL draft, or the transfer portal, that really is the most exciting thing. So,
right, and going back to what I said earlier of just how difficult it is to really have a roster of guys where you develop for a long time, like Mizzou has kind of built itself on. It will be interesting to kind of see the domino effects on this of both ends of college football, from high school recruits to the NFL draft. I mean, the NFL draft, we've already seen affected by it, where specifically just rounds, the middle rounds really are the most affected by it, because these guys have, the COVID years add some more to it, but also just the fact of where a lot of guys are going to stay in college for as long as they can if they're going to get more money in college than being a fifth round NFL draft pick. So there's that effect of it. And then also in high school, you would think these schools are going to really prioritize guys that can contribute right away. And there's so many effects on it for the coaching carousel, but it's going to suck for a lot of these prospects like Williams Nwaneri, you would think. that might not be as highly as coveted if they aren't showing signs of where they'd be able to contribute right away, if they don't already have the IQ, if they don't already have fully built into their frame. So I think you'll see even, I mean, IMG Academy, St. Thomas Aquinas, these schools that are renowned for developing talent and having them pro ready. I mean, that's where Nicholas Rodriguez comes from. Probably gain even more popularity out of high school just because of their credibility. So again, main takeaway from this is that Nwaneri's decision does not come in a vacuum at all. There's so many factors going on in college football that play into it, and that his departure tell us about, really. So that's going to wrap it up for us today. Williams Nwaneri into the transfer portal, biggest loss for Missouri in the transfer portal this year, and I mean, depending on what he becomes, could be the biggest for Mizzou since the transfer portal opened. But as Michael mentioned, Drinkwitz has certainly shown the ability to bring in guys both through the portal and high school classes. So we'll see where Mizzou goes from there. We appreciate you tuning in. We hope you tune into the rest of our coverage at Mizzou on SI.